Welcome to As a Crow Flies Hiking. Today I'm headed to Georgia to meet with the owner and founder of Walhalla Hammocks. He tells me that he can make a very comfortable setup for a hammock camping. I am a ground dweller, but I've been hearing for years from my friends that do backpacking with hammocks that it's a lot more comfortable to sleep in a hammock than a tent. And I'm willing to try because I'm all about comfort. All right, let's head to Georgia and check out Walhalla Hammocks. Let's go. All right, I made it to the campsite where Walhalla Hammocks and Outdoors is located. And here's the founder and owner of Walhalla Hammocks and Outdoors, Jason Flowers.
Hello.
Jason, thanks for being a part of this.
I'm glad you made the drive up here.
It's been an exciting afternoon, but my eyes have been a little glazed over because you explained to me a lot of stuff about hammocks I would have never known. Tell me a little bit first before we get started. What is Walhalla Hammocks and Outdoors?
It's something I started when my wife was recovering from surgeries, and I just wanted to make synthetic underquilts and top quilts. I found out really quickly that people weren't really that enthusiastic about buying them because they didn't pack down that great.
So you somehow switched over to hammocks?
Yeah, so I was just like, well, I'm just gonna make some netless hammocks and post them on Craigslist. And I don't think I sold one of those, but people messaged me and said, hey, can you make me a hammock with a bug net? And I was like, I can watch a YouTube show on how to do that, sure. But let me make one for myself first. And then the second one I made, I shipped it out. I'm sure if I got it back and looked at it, it would be pretty scary. But the person who has it loves it.
And now you are custom making all kinds of hammocks.
Yeah.
You invited me to come out here because we were having a conversation about hammocks, and you said, I'd rather you come out to this hang that you're doing. It's called the Who Hang.
Yeah.
Walhalla Hammocks and Outdoors,
Yep.
WHO. And I thought, well, why does he want me to come out and look at him? And you kind of explained it to me. And now I see.
This way you could get to see how everybody does everything a little different, and you get to try out different hammock materials and different styles of hammocks. Because not only a gathered end hammock, but you also got to try out a bridge hammock.
I did. Yeah, I got to see that, the symmetrical, asymmetrical.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do in this video. I want to talk to you about fabrics, insulation, hardware. I want to talk to you about tarps. And lastly, I want to talk to you about if somebody like me, backpacking, a lightweight backpacker, what would you do if you're customizing a hammock?
Ways to save weight.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
I kind of got the sense that when you were talking to me about hammocks, that the main thing you want to start with is fabrics.
Yes.
What's out there? What's the options that somebody like me that's not doing hammocks could get into?
So the first thing you need to think about is when you sleep in your bed at home, do you prefer a hard mattress or a soft mattress? Because that's going to be the basis. If you prefer a hard mattress, then we're going to stay to some less stretchier materials. If you prefer a soft mattress, then we're going to start with stretchier materials first.
When you say stretchy materials, like which ones? What is out there that's stretchy?
Well, so like a stretchier material, the least stretchiest one is going to be like a 1.6 Hyper D type material. And then if you really like a lot of stretch, you can go all the way up to the 0.71 monolite and cloud materials. Mm-hmm. And they're like sleeping on a spring or a waterbed.
You showed me the 1.3, right?
Yeah, the 1.3 mountain.
Is that an in-between between the cloud?
Yeah, so like if you're wanting to go with a lighter weight hammock, that would be the firm version of a lighter weight hammock.
Okay. And if you want to go the lightest fabric you can, it's the cloud.
Yeah, it would be like the cloud or 0.7 monolite. They're both the same. My website is mainly just for an information. You just go on there and look at some stuff so you have a general idea. And then I prefer that you send me a message, or you can call or text me or email me. We'll email back and forth and we'll talk about some things, and then we'll decide on what might work best for you. Because I just don't want you to go to my website and say that's what I want.
Yeah.
And I make it and send it to you and find out that you ordered a soft hammock and you needed a firm one.
That's kind of what I did today. We had a conversation about certain, and I immediately saw some things that I wouldn't want,
Yeah.
and then some things that I like.
And that's the good thing about hammocks is everything is so modular. You can literally piece together with 10 different manufacturers because you like what they're doing on one certain product better than another one. You might like the way I do my tarps or my hammocks or ground cloths. You know, you can mix and match everything. It's not like you just have to come to me and buy every single piece.
I noticed that there's this thing like symmetrical and asymmetrical, and for somebody that's a backpacker and uses tents, I don't even know what that means or how that would benefit me to backpack with a hammock instead of a tent.
So, like an asymmetrical, you're gonna lay diagonally across the hammock when you lay in a camping hammock. You're not gonna lay it straight down the middle of any camping hammock.
Mm-hmm.
So an asymmetrical means that your head is either gonna be on the right side of the hammock and your feet are gonna cross over the hammock to the left side, and that's called the left asylum. Or you're gonna be with your head to the left and your feet to the right, and that's called the right asylum.
Well, how would that benefit a backpacker instead of just a symmetrical cut?
Because you can also get it with symmetrical, where you could lay head right or head left depending, and if you're like somebody who tosses and turns, that might be what you want. But if you're a backpacker, you'll shave off a little bit of weight by picking a head right or a head left hammock, because you'll be losing a little bit of material off the hammock.
Okay. And along with that, the cut, I've also seen you got multiple ways of doing the top of the hammock, with a bug net, without, different ways. So what options are out there for that?
You know, you can have your regular no-seam bug netting, and then I prefer to use a monolite bug netting, because a monolite bug netting is going to be very rip resistant. Regular no-seam, it doesn't rip easy, but you could put holes in it pretty quickly without even realizing it. They're in the same weight group as the no-seam. Okay. The only one drawback is you don't get as much of a breeze through the monolite as you would the no-seam, but I feel like the heat transfer is a little bit better, even though you don't get that breeze.
If you look at some of these websites, you see the options where you can take either the no-seam or the monolith bug netting off, and then put another like complete fabric.
Cover. Yeah, winter cover they call that.
Why would you do that or not do that?
So the theory behind a winter cover is it'll hold heat in there, and it'll be 10 to 15 degrees warmer inside the hammock than the outside. But one of the drawbacks to that is it condensates when you're in really cold weather, and if you're really below freezing weather, you'll actually get frost in there, and when you go to unzip it in the morning, you'll have snow falling down on you.
You've created your own snowfall.
You'll still have it a little bit with a bug net hammock, but it'll dry out way better because you can just kind of flip it over and shake it off, and it's not as bad.
One of the reasons years ago I tried a hammock and got out of it quickly is I bought a 10-foot hammock and I never could feel comfortable. So what is your suggestion when you're dealing with lengths of hammocks?
So the normal person, their best length of a hammock to lay in and get a flat lay where it's like you're laying in your bed at home is an 11-foot hammock. But if you're shorter, I mean, I've made hammocks from 10.5, 10, 9 foot long for shorter people. And then if you're 6'3" or over, you're gonna want to start going to an 11.5 or 12. But if you're in between the 5 and the 6'3" range, 11 foot seems to be the perfect place for most everybody. On the hammock, you have something called the ridge line, and that sets the sag in the hammock. And every manufacturer might tweak it a little bit, but it's normally around 83% of the hammock length, and that sets the sag. And with the sag in there, that's what makes you allowable to lay flat as possible in there. So
I'm 5'11", 11-foot hammock would probably be my sweet spot of length.
See, and say you decided, no, I want to go to a 12. The problem when you lay in a 12 is your ridge line and stuff's going to be so high, so if you have an organizer in there, it's going to be hard to reach that stuff in there. And the other thing it's going to be is you're going to need trees that are farther apart, and your suspension's going to have to be so high up in the tree you're not going to be able to get it to where you really need it.
So Jason, there's a couple of things that I thought about as far as backpackers trying to get into hammock camping, and one of the things and reservations I had was I don't like to do knots. Now as a kid I did knots as a Boy Scout, and I probably got merit badges for them, but I can't remember knots. Maybe it's because I'm above 50, I don't know. But I go to YouTube, I'll learn a knot, and then 3 weeks later I forget it. So are there just a few knots that you need to learn?
Yeah, there's 3 basic ones that you need to know. For the hammock, the only one you need to know is a Beckett hitch.
Okay.
And that's only if you want to go without hardware on your, like if you're trying to save weight, then you're going to use a lightweight strap and tie a Beckett hitch onto your end of each hammock. And then the other knots is for your tying out your tarp to the trees, you're going to use something called the trucker's hitch.
Okay, I've heard of that before.
And that's basically, you're just putting a loop in the string, and then you're going to wrap your cord around the tree, and then you're going to use that as your leverage, and then you're just going to wrap it around and maybe tie like a half hitch.
Okay, so that is for going to the tree.
Yeah.
So we talked about the hammock to the tree, the tarp to the tree, and then what about for...
So for your tie outs, I don't use any hardware. I use a taut line hitch, which is one of the first knots you should have learned in Scouts.
I probably did. I don't remember.
When my son was in Scouts, it was always my job to teach these knots. But the taut line hitch is a pretty simple knot. You just go around the thing, and then you go 2 under and 1 over, and you pull it all tight, and then it's so you can adjust your cord
and pull this tension down or up.
So say it was going to be raining, I could just pull this tarp down in a matter of a couple seconds.
And so I think there's a lot of backpackers who don't want to get into hammock camping while they're backpacking because they're afraid of knots. But there's a lot of stuff out there for accessories on suspension.
There's a ton of different hardware for people who are scared of knots.
Okay.
So
tell me about, like, what do you offer for that, or what would you?
Dutchware is like the king of bling.
King of bling. Okay.
Yeah. So he's got all kinds of little doodads. He's got wasps, stingers. They're all named after like bugs, and when he makes them, they actually look like a wasp. You know, or a flea they have, and it looks like a bug with wings.
So with those, you can get away from knots by simply using the cord to wrap and make tension with those different accessories.
Yeah, because it has like a little hook, and you just, like if you're putting up your tarp, you just put it between the trees, and it has a little hook. You loop your string through it, and you pull it tight, and once you get it tight, you pinch it and just wrap your string around, and it has a little spot that wedges the string in there, and you just pull it tight and it wedges, and you don't need to tie no knot.
Well, that's good for tarps, but what about the suspension on your actual hammock?
So they have buckles, and they have something called the whoopee sling, and it's just kind of like the Chinese finger cuffs. You run a string through and you pull it, and you just adjust it, and then it's called milking the berry. You just slide it down to make sure the string's on there tight and it won't slide, and you put a whoopee hook on the other end, and that just goes to a continuous loop of your hammock. For somebody new, I always try to recommend cinch buckles. It's basically something that they used on a parachute to adjust the harness on a parachute, and we use those on the hammock because they're the most user-friendly. They're not the lightest. You just got to take a little bit of the weight off, and you can adjust it fairly easy.
Okay. Let's talk about insulation. As a backpacker, I have 2 layers. I have my quilt on top, and I have my sleeping pad on bottom.
Yeah.
And that creates my sleeping system, essentially. And I assume you got to do that for a hammock as well, right?
Yeah, so you're going to have a top quilt on top, and then you're going to have an underquilt underneath. If you tried to just say, I'm just going to take the 0-degree sleeping bag, it's only going to be 30, I'm going to be fine. You got to stand up outside the hammock and pull this thing on you, then sit back in the hammock and then try to scoot your way to where you're comfortable in there.
Yeah.
If you just had a top quilt, you just get in the hammock, hook it over your feet and pull it up, and you're done. And you don't got to worry about trying to zip up a zipper.
Yeah.
If you use that sleeping bag in there and you lay down on it, you're crushing all the insulation, so you'll get CBS, cold butt syndrome.
Okay, cold butt syndrome. Okay, yeah. CBS.
And that's where you're laying in the hammock and you squished all the insulation out from underneath you, and your butt gets cold.
Right.
It'll literally feel like you're laying on a block of ice, even though the rest of your body's hot. But just underneath you, because you have all this air going around you, it's not like you're just laying on the ground.
And I guess that's probably one of the first mistakes that people get into.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people, they're like, hammock camping's terrible, I didn't sleep at all. And you start asking them questions, and they're like, well, I just used my sleeping bag, and my back was so cold all night. And then you're like, oh, you had CBS.
So instead of CBS, you use an underquilt.
Yeah, then you're going to want to put underquilts under there.
Okay.
And that just hangs underneath the hammock so that when you lay in there, it doesn't squish any of the insulation down. If you're buying your first underquilt, you're just going to want to think of what the coldest temperatures say. If it's 20, you're not going to go camping, but 30 you will. So then I would say I would get to 20 because you probably want to go, just in case you're camping, and say it gets down to like 28, you just want to have that little extra coverage. Because the only time the temperature of an underquilt comes into play is if you go below whatever the rating is for the underquilt. Where it's going to make the difference is on your top quilt. You want to kind of have, when you first get into this, you're going to want to just buy like the coldest temperature underquilt, and then your top quilt, you'll, buy your 10 degree, then you're going to want to buy like probably a 10 degree top quilt, and you're going to want to have maybe just like a blanket at first. But then as you get farther into hammock camping, then you're going to start getting top quilts to the temperatures, so you can change those out.
In case you want to go real cold winter camping or something.
And then after you really get deep into hammock camping, then you can start changing out underquilts for temperatures too, just so you can save weight backpacking.
What do you recommend with the tarp in relation to the hammock? Where do you go for tarp and fabrics?
Yeah, and that's also going to depend on whether you're backpacking or cart camping, how much protection you want, how much privacy you want. So for backpacking purposes, you're going to want to go with something a little lighter. You can buy them with doors, which totally seals you in, and you're like basically in a floating tent. Or you can get it, if you want to cut weight, you get it without the doors, and it's called a hex tarp, or you can get a rectangular tarp. If you get a rectangular tarp, if the weather got bad, you could technically fold the ends in.
Okay.
But they're not really, it's not as good as having doors. A lot of people just get a hex tarp or a rectangular tarp to start with. That way they still could have a little protection. Yeah. But then the other thing is materials. If you want to lighten your weight, you're going to want to go with like a Dyneema or an Ultra TNT, which is what this one's made out of.
That's what this is?
Yeah. There's also sil poly and sil nylon. And they have a sil poly membrane, which is a little thinner.
What would be the pros and cons of the sil poly versus like the TNT or the...
So like a sil poly, it can absorb a little bit of water. A sil nylon will absorb a lot of water, and if you're in a blowing heavy rain, it could mist you. But a sil nylon has a little bit better durability because it's a little stretchier, so if something hits it, it'll just kind of stretch out of the way. Sil poly is a little less durable because it doesn't really stretch, so it tears a little easier than sil nylon.
Yeah.
And then you can start going to this Ultra TNT and DCF Dyneema. The one fallback with Dyneema is it's prone to getting pinholes. So like if you get in a hailstorm, the hail will literally can put pinholes all in your...
So if you're going to get an 11-foot hammock, do you get 11-foot tarp or a 12-foot tarp?
If you get an 11-foot hammock, it's really not an 11-foot.
Okay.
You could shave a little weight by going with a 11-foot tarp. But the problem is you're very close to the ends of your hammock. Most people go with a 12-foot tarp just for that little bit of insurance. Most of the time, if you're going to get wet in a hammock, what happens is it runs down your suspension into the hammock.
Yeah. So you want that little bit of overhang on each side.
And when you tie that knot, that's going to be your water break. It's going to come down and hit that knot and drip off. Or if you have a piece of hardware there, it's going to hit that hardware and drop down.
The biggest question I have when I came out here is I want to get into hammock camping as I backpack. So I came to you and said, look, one of the things that I'm really concerned about is weight. And I'm not an ultralight backpacker, but I am trying to be as lightweight as I can because I'm over 50. My knees are not 20 anymore. You don't recommend ultralight hammocking, but you recommend lightweight hammocking. Tell me why.
Ultralight, you're losing durability. You literally just get one little pin prick in there and you put weight on it, it will just blow the bottom out of your hammock. If you go with a more, not quite an ultralight one, but a lightweight fabric, it's gonna be a little more forgiving and not as fragile. Say you're like a 200-pound person, you're not gonna want to go with like a 1.0 material or under 1.0. The max comfort rating of a 1.0 is 200 pounds.
So you're going to the limit of it.
Yeah. I always try to push people more towards like a 1.3 if they want to go lightweight, because you're gonna have more durability out of 1.3 materials and higher than below that.
Okay. So that may be a good mid-range for durability and still lightweight.
Now, if you're like somebody who's only like 120 or 130 pounds, you know, the lightweight stuff would work better for you because you're not putting as much stress on that.
Any other ways I can shave weight off the hammock that would get me lighter on the hammock base itself?
Yeah, you would, instead of having a zipper on both sides, you would put it only on one side, and you would also get rid of the hardware on the hammock, like the quilt hooks and tie outs, and you would, instead of having the hardware, you would just have a grosgrain loop, basically a little piece of ribbon on a loop. And also the labels, the reason I put them the way I do is if you're a real gram weenie, you can just take a scissors and cut those off.
But then nobody would know you got
I
the
know,
Walhalla.
but it was on there when they got it. But I know some people, they'll sew them straight to the material, and I put them on there. If somebody really wants to cut them off, they can, if they're just trying to save weight.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for being a part of this and agreeing to talk about hammocks. I want to get into hammock camping, just didn't know how, and because of today, you're showing me the fabric, showing me the hardware, the installation, the tarps. I think I'm going to try this. So I appreciate it very much. And for you out there, if you want to get in touch with Walhalla Hammocks, what's the best way to do it?
Instagram, Facebook, or WalhallaHammocks&Outdoors.com. And my phone number is on almost all my social media. You can call me. I prefer if you call me, but you can email me, text me, messenger, if that's what you feel comfortable with.
Okay.
And we'll talk about what you like and prefer and get you hooked up with something that'll suit your sleeping needs.
And I think really the moral of this video is don't just go out there and buy a hammock without talking to somebody about it and understand it, because if I've learned today, it's a huge learning curve and you got to know what you want to fit your needs. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next episode or adventure of As the Crow Flies Hiking.